Henry Dreyfuss, one of the world's best designers that have ever existed. And Henry and his team came in, and they created hundreds of prototypes, and they did all sorts of evaluations with real users. They spent time in people's homes and in offices, and they studied what people wanted to do. And they finally settled on this design, the H model. And this became a canonical thermostat. This was the premier thing. And it came out in the days of the sort of tail end of Art Deco and the sort of 50s space age thing, and this round, smooth shape was really something everybody wanted in their home. And Honeywell made millions of these things, and they made a ton of money off these things. They pretty much owned the thermostat market until 2011, when the Nest came out. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there are 34 states in the United States that have laws on the books that say if you give a presentation on design, you have to mention the Nest. And this is one. So I have met my legal obligation. Now, I don't want to talk about how great the Nest is, or how good it is, that UX is, or what its flaws are, which it has many. You know, they've been bought by Google, so personally, I think they are basically the eye of Sauron in your house. But the thing that I'm most interested in about the Nest, the question that has been nagging me since it first came out, is a question you never hear anybody talk about, which is, why didn't Honeywell come out with the Nest? Honeywell owned the market. They were the market leader in thermostats. How come they did not come out with this product? Now, to understand that, we have to take apart one more maturity. And this has to do with markets. Turns out that when something first shows up on the market, it's very much about technology. And when the first cell phone showed up, it was the Motorola StarTAC. It was this horrible 4-pound, $4,000 unit. It took 8 hours to charge. It had a 15-minute charge. You could make a 15-minute call. You had to shout at it to get it to work. And it sold thousands. People loved it. It was hugely popular. It changed the market. And suddenly, they owned this marketplace. And that's well and good. And in this stage, you could be the market leader until you have a competitor. And when a competitor comes, now you have to compare features. What is their product like versus this product? And suddenly, we're looking at all the different features. And for those of you who are old enough to remember before the iPhone, the way phones were, was there were thousands to choose from, and they had all these different features, and you had to go and figure out what features you wanted. And towards the end of that stage, people were like, I just want a phone that makes phone calls. And this stage ends when suddenly there are just no more features you can add that anybody cares about. You get to this point where it's like, yeah, I don't care about that feature. I just want to do simple things. This thing is too complicated. That's how we got the paperclip for Microsoft. And suddenly, we're in a new stage, which is a stage about experience. The experience of owning the thing, using the thing, trumps the actual individual features that it has. It's about the whole thing. And oftentimes, the experience comes from something that didn't exist before, a company that was not in the market. You know, when Apple came out, they never produced a cell phone before. And all these big cell phone manufacturers who had millions of units in the world were like, there's no way they're catching up to us. And then the iPhone 1 comes out, and they laugh at the lack of features. Remember, it didn't have the ability to send pictures through SMS. You couldn't make video with it. It had iTunes, but it wasn't very good. There are all these problems with this thing. It didn't have cut and paste. It didn't have apps. Right? None of those things existed at the time the iPhone 1 came out. But it was simple. It was a great experience. And it took over the market. We used to think this was the end stage here. But it turns out there's another stage. And I think we're seeing it today with the iPhone 11, which is there's a point where the product is really just a piece of a bigger ecosystem. It's a part of a bigger thing. And this is where the product itself, to some extent, becomes a commodity. This is why the iPhone 11 is actually half the price of the iPhone 10 or X or whatever that thing is. And the reason is because it's, to some extent, you don't buy a phone to make phone calls anymore. In fact, there's a whole generation now that we have bred that don't want to ever make a phone call. And so, it's not about that. And it becomes part of the bigger thing. And you have to sort of see the pieces in the bigger thing as a whole. And this is exemplified by a lawsuit that happened a couple years ago when American Airlines sued a company called GoGo InFlight. GoGo InFlight was the first Wi-Fi vendor for airlines. And American, wanting to be the first one to offer it, signed this 10-year contract. And 5 years into it, they're like, this Wi-Fi sucks. You've got to upgrade it. And they're like, I can't upgrade it. You've got to get these things are on planes. You can't do that. They're like, okay, well, we're breaking our 10-year contract. You can't do that. So they have a lawsuit. And the lawsuit was because American was finding that in their market work that customers were actually choosing other airlines. They were actually choosing United because United had better Wi-Fi. Imagine choosing United on purpose. And they were doing that because United's Wi-Fi was better. And so Americans like, we gotta break this contract. We gotta go with some other vendor. Now the judge threw the case out because, and this is a quote, who was stupid enough to sign a 10-year contract for Wi-Fi? And the companies have made up since, and they've installed a whole bunch of new equipment on the planes as part of the settlement. And it's working better now. But this is an example of a piece of radio technology rooting your flight experience enough that people will choose a different way. And that's what this commodity stage is like. Now, if we want to get to the experience and commodity stages, we have to get to the infused right design stage. In order to be able to compete successfully here, we have to have our teams understand what design is. So this brings me back to the question, how come Honeywell didn't invent the next? And if we look at it on this scale, what we can see is that the H model was definitely in the technology stage. Most people did not have thermostats until this stage. You wanted the heat on, you flipped the switch for your furnace, you turned it off when it was too warm. And suddenly you could set a temperature. And so this was brand new. And people loved the idea of setting it and leaving it. Or setting it and fighting it. But they didn't stop there. They tried to produce thermostats with lots of features to get people to upgrade, programmable thermostats and other types of thermostats. But they never took off because the experience sucked. And then the Nest comes out. And the Nest programs itself. It figures out the behavior in the house, and it just sets the temperature when people are around or not around. Does what it's supposed to until it stops. Now, that's how it looks on the market. But we can also look at this on organizational maturity. And what we can see is quite clear. The H model was spot UX design. They hired Henry Dreyfuss. Henry Dreyfuss was the only one who understood, and his team were the only ones who understood design. Henry came in and did what any good consultant did, built them an awesome thing. They thanked him, they paid him, and when they were done, he went home. And when he went home, all of Honeywell's knowledge of how to do that again went home with him. And then Henry Dreyfuss did what every great designer eventually does. He died. No, seriously. Every great designer does this. If you're a great designer, you will do this too. It's only a matter of time. I don't know why this is a surprise. That's why this was Spot US Design. But the Nest was built with a team who completely understood design, even if they weren't designers. The electrical engineers, the product managers, the marketing people, everybody understood design. And so they were able to do this. I just want to say, there are people who will say, Honeywell makes lots of products. They're a big, multi-billion-dollar company. Thermostats was actually a very small percentage of their revenue. Maybe they just didn't care. And that could be true. Maybe they just didn't care. This is how much they didn't care. Google bought Nest for $3.2 billion. I'm going to guess the shareholders care that Honeywell didn't have that value. So, that could be it. But the bigger question is, how did Nest pull this off? How did Nest become Design Infused? We had this theory for a while that this was a startup thing. That startups just can sort of decide where they want to go and just start. And it's sort of true. The original theory we called the stem cell theory. Embryonic stem cells have one purpose in their existence, which is to duplicate, to make more cells. And they keep doing that for the growth of the embryo. But there's this weird thing that happens. They don't die. Unlike Henry Dreyfuss, they don't die. Those cells go on once all the cells have been made. And what they do instead is they morph into something different. They become a different cell. And each embryonic stem cell just sort of chooses something different to become. Some become liver cells, some become stomach cells, some become colon cells. And so we thought maybe that's how this works. Maybe when you're small enough, you're sort of in this sort of embryonic stage, none of this makes a difference. And then you just sort of become what you need to become. And some organizations become infused, and some are in the dark ages, and it's just how that works. And so we called it the stem cell theory, and we thought this explained why startups work. And we had, we thought, okay, we found corroborating evidence because we've met many startups that sort of act like colons. But it turns out that that's not it at all. It turns out that it's not because they have some magical property as a startup. It's because of Tony Fadell. Tony Fadell was the founder of Nest, and Tony Fadell came from Apple. He was the lead designer on first the iPod, then the iPhone, then the iPad. Tony Fadell knew how to do good design because Apple taught him how to do good design. And Tony Fadell, as a founder, did what lots of founders do. He went into Apple and recruited his whole team. And all of them knew how to do design. And then as they staffed up, they made sure everybody else in the company, no matter what job they had, knew about design because they were designers. So all they did was hire people who knew about design. Honeywell, on the other hand, had an existing company with thousands of people, and like all companies, the people were all over the spectrum. And if they wanted to produce what Nest produced, they would have to either train everybody or fire everybody and just hire a new team that knows everything about design. And that's really hard. That's much harder than starting from scratch and just only hiring people who know design. That's the advantage that startups have. Now there's one more inflection point I want to tell you about. And that inflection point has to do with what happens after we get to infused UX design. Before the inflection point happens, you're in this place where a company will ship something if it works technically and it meets the business needs. Those two things happen, we'll ship it. If it's not designed well, well, that's okay. We'll fix it in the next release. We just gotta get it out. If we gotta get people using it, we'll fix it in the next release. For the longest time, I thought that was Microsoft's tagline. We'll fix it in the next release. And that's where we are before this inflection point. But when the inflection point comes, we call it the UX tipping point, there's this thing that happens. Sure, we still have to have it work technically and meet business needs, but it also has to be well designed. If it's not well designed, we won't ship it. The Magic Band was 2 years late. It was 2 years late because not all the functionality that was originally designed was working when the bands were ready. And they held on to it. They didn't ship it for 2 years. $1 billion project. Michael Eisner was calling the head of product every day, saying, "We shipped it today. We shipped it today. Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And I said, "Nope, not ready. Parts aren't wired right. Other pieces aren't wired. The hotels work. We can use it for just the hotel part, but we can't pay for things in the park. Can't do VIP access. They're not there yet. We can do some of the rides, not all the rides. Do some of the stores, not all the stores. Okay, we'll wait." 2 years ago, they wouldn't do it until they got the defined level of development that they were looking for. Then they shipped. This was a huge pressure point. That's the UX tipping point. You'll know you've gotten it when a product is shipped. I just got an email the other day from a product manager who was so excited because they didn't ship his product. They didn't ship. It's fantastic. I'm like, this is a sentence I've never heard a product manager. Yeah, they didn't think they'd go for it. They didn't ship it. Okay, win. So that's it, right? That's the tipping point. So how do we get there? In design, we talk a lot about a design process. Oh my gosh, we fetish over design processes. We're always talking about design processes. And design processes, for one thing, when we draw them out these days, if you just Google design process and look at the images, there's only two styles right now. There are either diamonds or loops. We've entered the jewelry phase of UX design. And these diamonds or loops are these magical processes that work like the Newton's pendulum, where you pull it back and you let it go, and it does exactly the same thing every time you do it. That's how we imagine it. And we think it's so important that we do things like we ask every candidate we interview what their design process is, as if we never let them use it. Hell, we probably won't even let them use what we think our design process is. Right? Because they don't work. We never follow the design process. My friend Dan Mall sort of equates this notion of always operating the same as just being deficient. And instead, we have to have an adaptable system. This is a sports ball pitch, right? And when players come running out onto the sports, onto this thing, right? The football rink or the, baseball court, they don't have this giant gant. That's not how we do it, right? Instead, it's an adaptable system. They have playbooks filled with plays, and the plays are not predetermined in their order or timing. It's just something they practice, and then situationally they decide with situational awareness what play they're going to execute. And they execute that, and it either works or it doesn't work, and then they try another play, or they try the same play again. But they're always adaptive. And that's what we need to do. And it turns out that if you look at UX design, there are lots of these strategies, lots of these plays that you can use. In fact, we started to collect them up, and we've now got more than 130 of these strategies. And some of them are literacy strategies, some of them are fluency strategies, some of them are mastery strategies. They're all there. And what we can do with these strategies is we can start to say, okay, which ones work? So here's just a couple examples. One that is amazing is what we call immersive exposure. And immersive exposure is when you basically spend time actually watching users. And this changes everything. This is a literacy play, right? Literacy, remember, is about learning to do good and bad. And there's no better way to see what bad design is than to watch your own users use the stuff you've created. If you're unconsciously incompetent, it's probably going to be bad. Users are going to tell you. Suddenly you know. Right? So this is a literacy play. And we can use things like usability tests to tell us whether a design is working or not. Even better would be to go into the field, meet the customers in their own locations, see what they're doing. And we figured out a while back that there's an inflection point with just exposure, that if you hit the minimum of 2 hours every 6 weeks for every influencer, your designs get remarkably better, because that repetitive visiting of users and understanding what the problems they're having are and seeing what you need to do to fix it and seeing when you fixed it, that process gives you a feedback loop unlike any other. And suddenly your designs get better. And if you only did this, you would see improvement. And we can sort of map out what's happening with the user. If we look at just the journey that they go on, right? So we might have a series of steps to them doing something like booking a hotel, and we can measure those steps on a scale of frustration to delight, and we can start to see which parts are delightful and which parts are frustrating, which parts are delightful and which parts are frustrating. So that's immersive exposure. And we can tell this story that people in the organization will get it, because they see that the designs we're creating are not producing the outcomes we're desiring. Now, the second level is shared experience. Shared experience is both a literacy and a fluency play. And what this is making sure that we have a vision of what the experience looks like in the future. We can think of the vision as being this flag in the sand that everyone can march to. This is what our experience will look like 5 years from now. So everybody gets this clear picture of what. Oh, okay. I lost my vision for a second. We can see clearly what this is, and that flag now is where everybody's going. We say, okay, this is what we want to build. This is our future. 5 years from now, it's going to look like this. So that's the vision. And how do we figure out what that should be? Well, it turns out initially it's really easy. If we've done our exposure, we know what's frustrating, what's delightful, we just ask the question, well, what if we made it delightful all the way across? What would that look like? Right? That's our vision. Let's just make what we do actually delightful. Okay. So we go ahead with that. The last play I want to share with you today has to do with what we call a culture of continuous learning. The culture of continuous learning is a literacy, fluency, and mastery play. It works at all levels because it's always about learning. Now, people talk about learning, but these days I hear a lot of people talk about failing. We fetishize failing, right? You gotta fail fast, you gotta fail quickly, you gotta move fast and break things. I'm not big on the failing thing. People say, well, you can't learn anything unless you fail. That's not entirely true. In fact, I know a whole bunch of people who seem to fail on a regular basis and don't seem to learn a damn thing about it. So that's definitely not true. And you can definitely learn things in a risk-mitigated sense without having to fail first. how will it change what you do in the future? And it turns out that one question alone, that moment of reflection, forces everybody to think about learning. But more importantly, everybody in the organization is at the stand-up. We're not a big team. And everybody in the organization, from the leaders all the way down, are every day admitting that there was something they didn't know the day before that they now know. And when you have everybody admitting that they are learning every day, it makes it easier for people to talk about what they've learned. And when people talk about what they've learned, they internalize what they've learned. So these are the 3 plays. Now there's 127 more that I didn't tell you about, but these 3 plays, if you just did these 3 things, you'd see amazing improvements in the products and services that you deliver. That's what's incredible. If you did that, what will happen is you create something, like when a 6-year-old walks up to what's called the magic Mickey, and they hold out their wrist, and the Mickey makes this spinning colored light sequence, and there's this noise that it emits. And because of the special noise that it just emitted, every Disney cast member, every Disney employee who's within a 15-foot radius of that Mickey turns around, looks at the kid and says, "Happy birthday, Angela." It's creepy, but it's true. And that's what great design can get you. So this is what I came to talk to you about. People learn something like design, going from unconscious incompetence all the way up to unconscious competence. We have to help people become literate, become fluent, and some of them master the craft. We need to help our organizations mature by first getting to design as a service, then embedded UX design, then infused UX design. And finally, we need to have an adaptable playbook, one that's filled with plays that we choose based on the situation that's going to get us to each of these things. That's what I came about. Now, if you are interested at all in UX strategy, we have just started a newsletter in the last few months that's free. Every week, drop something in your mailbox that is all about different strategies, looking at the full gamut of what UX strategy can be. So that's uiu.com/strategies. All you need to do is sign up.